Okay, so so let's talk about this, and it'll be based on the Book of Lama Zopa's, which I happen to edit. So I'm familiar with the teachings a little bit, but I love to talk about it. And I think it's and I notice that people love to hear about it because we all, I think, especially with our animals, we want to do something. Even if you're not sure about reincarnation or God or heaven, somehow people want to do something. They feel there's something they can do, they feel a lot better. Not to mention your grandmother, not to mention ourselves. So let's look at this topic taken from Lama Zopa's advice and hear it from his perspective of advice. And some of it might be helpful, some might not, and that's okay. So yeah, so just to get the Buddhist view, I think, particularly, well, I mean, it's the Buddhist view in general, but specifically, of course, the Tibetan Buddhist approach to how, and the whole book is framed in terms of how to help our loved ones. Of course, it's all related to ourselves, but the advice is in terms of how to help others before, during, and after death. So we think we're going to listen, take some advice from this so we can take it for ourselves, so we get for our own sake and for the sake of others. Okay. So what I noticed is very interesting. It's in the modern day, more and more people are kind of more and more talking about death. People are working in the hospice system. I remember going to a conference in Australia, and I was very moved by all these young doctors and nurses electing to work, for the dying. And I remember even I always quote as a hospital in Sydney, a children's hospital. And the doctor who ran that was this conference. Because I mean, imagine children dying. It's about the worst thing possible. We can't bear the thought of children dying, So we leave it underneath. We don't want to talk about it. We can't bear it. No one can discuss it with each other. And so yeah, it was a very wonderful man. And it was like just to open the whole topic up, And I remember in the hospital, the morgue for the dead babies and young children, he had it decorated like a nursery. And it was open, it was wonderful. So he was trying to encourage people just to be open about it. And one little boy, come and meet my dead brother. I mean, just so open about it. It was so sweet, so moving. Just stop making it this horrible topic that we can't bear to talk about. And so the fear and the anguish, because it's bad enough losing your child, but then not to be able to talk about it either. It's horrible for the world. And I was very moved by that. It was such a wonderful man, So, of course, the main aspect, if we have a materialist point of view in the world, then, of course, the main point of this is to break down the fears when we or our loved ones die, and to do what we can to sort of make it a good experience, I suppose. And especially, it's very nice if the loved one is relaxed and happy and they all die peacefully and around their loved ones. That's what you read when you read obituaries. He died, Robert Redford just recently died, didn't he? And he died in bed, surrounded by his loved ones. That always is the ideal scenario for the world, isn't it? Nothing wrong with that. But of course, there's an added component that's massive for the Buddhists, and especially the Tibetan Buddhists, because they're really into talking about karma and the whole principle of reincarnation. I mean, it's a Buddhist teaching, but it plays out very strongly and upfront in the whole Tibetan Buddhist approach, So there's, of course, Lama Zopa Rinpoche being a Tibetan Buddhist and all his advice. So it's, as he says, and this is where the unique approach from the Buddhist perspective is surprising to us. He says, if you want to help anybody in this life, when they need you most is at the time of death. And that's very surprising if you have a materialist point of view, that once you're dead, you're gone. What do you mean it's the most important time of life? But from the Buddhist point of view, it's what death is, quite literally, is the process of leaving this life and moving to another one. And that goes without saying. That's the whole Buddhist view. In fact, the way they describe it, especially from the Vajrayana perspective, the death process is described in great detail. And there are many meditations on how to do it throughout your life, how to be prepared for death. Why? Because at the time of the death, through the process of death, at particular stages, and they're very precise about it, is when the particular karmic seed that we have created, I mean, everything we think and do and say, is this process of karma. Everything we think and do and say kind of programs our mind, or as the Buddha would put it, leaves seeds in our mind. And during that process of death, in the beginning stages of it, we can discuss it, is the period at which a particular karmic seed will be triggered that will determine your next life. And so this is the most crucial point from the Buddhist perspective, leave this life and be able to navigate the process with a happy, virtuous mind, so that you can then get another decent human rebirth and continue on your spiritual path. And this is underpinning all the advice that Rinpoche gives. And that's something that I think in modern thinkers is a surprising approach. We don't think this way, you know, because even for most Buddhists, it's hard to think about karma. We don't think about it much. In fact, we don't like it. And it's completely opposite to our views. If we have the view of, if we're a Christian, we sort of have an idea of reincarnation. You would reincarnate or heaven or hell. There's only two options. In Buddhism, there are more options for the next life. So if you're a Christian, you've got a very devoted Christian approach to life. You'd also have a similar approach. You try to die with a happy mind so you can go to heaven and be with God, or with your loved ones. I remember when Nancy Reagan, after Ronnie Reagan died, she loved her Ronnie, and she asked Billy Graham, you know, that famous Christian man years ago. She said to him, "Will I see Ronnie when I die? Will I see him in heaven?" He said, "Yes, you will." So she was very happy and was looking forward to go to heaven to be with Ronnie again. So that's fine. At least you die with a happy mind then, wouldn't you? But if you're a materialist, I mean, what have you got to look forward to? It's a big black hole. No wonder there's so much fear. I mean, who wants to fall into a black hole, you know? So unless you've really worked on your mind and just recognize this is the only life, and you try to make the most of your life, and you die with a happy mind because it's all gone. But we don't tend to think this way, you know? So, okay, there's Buddhist approach. Well, there's two main things. There's the way to learn to live your life in a way that prepares you for death. That's the first step. And then there's the second, then the other advice, which is the main subject of Rinpoche's book, and all the advice in it, is what to do during the weeks and months, the days, the hours before death, at the time the breath stops, after the breath stops, and when the mind leaves the body, probably 3 days later, and in the next 6 or 7 weeks, there's this whole steps of things that can be done. All of them geared to helping the person who's died have a decent rebirth so they can continue practicing a spiritual path. That's the bottom line. That's the Buddhist approach, you know. And that includes your pets, you know. Things to do to help the person die peacefully. And why you want to die peacefully, and this is the logic from this perspective, from the Buddhist view, when the mind is peaceful, and we can see this, we can attest to this in our own lives, when your mind is peaceful, there's space then for virtuous thoughts, isn't there? Like love and kindness and forgiveness and acceptance. But if you're freaking out, if you're having a panic attack or angry or resentful or jealous, this is the worst, most painful state of mind, because all that does is trigger more drama and more negativity, you know. So the bottom line in the Buddhist perspective is to help your loved one be peaceful. Do everything that's so, you know, even all Rinpoche talks about the way to, you know, especially if someone's dying slowly, so you know they're dying, they're being called dying, or they're sick and they're old and they're moving towards death. Everything you do has to be for their benefit, to enable them to be as peaceful and calm as possible. So one of the things that's really crucial, for example, and most obvious piece of advice, but we often don't think this, is the environment in which you are, you know, the room in which you sleep every day, in and out of sleep or coma or whatever. Often sick rooms where sick people are really horrible, you know, especially if you're in a hospital. I mean, I'm not being rude about doctors and nurses in hospitals, but probably from the perspective, the Buddhist perspective, it's about the worst place to die, because it's really noisy, full of clanking and banging and machines and other people and around the world, people around the clock, you know. There's no, unless you're rich and have got your own private room, I'd say it's very unusual to have a peaceful time in a hospital. Do you understand? I mean, people are so kind. It's probably the worst place. The ideal scenario used to be that way. I know our grandmother was to sleep on, to die at home. But most Westerners don't like that. I mean, there's a friend of mine who did for years, ran one part of the FPMT, one of our centres in Australia, in Queensland, in Brisbane, the Karuna Hospice, which is a service, really palliative care, providing carers to go out into people's homes to help the dying, help the family and the dying. They said that most people don't die at home. Most people die in institutions, you know. I suppose because we don't like it. We always hand everything over to the professionals, isn't it, these days, more and more. I don't know, when my grandmother died, we were Catholic, all the nuns would come and say prayers around her, the priest would come, and then she was left for a couple of days. Prayers were said the whole time. It's very similar in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. But the whole idea is, the bottom line is, the central thing is, when at the time of death, in order to be ready for a virtuous karmic seed, this is really the precise point. And that takes us a while to get to this one, because we never go there. We don't go to this point if we think of it just in general death, you know. But the essential point in the Buddhist view, the way it's taught certainly in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, on the basis of karma, the whole thing is based upon the logic of karma, that every millisecond of what we think and do and say programs our mind, that we're not here as a result of a creator's handiwork, we're not the handiwork of our parents, that our consciousness went into our mother's egg and sperm at the time of conception from before, and that our mind will leave the body at the time of death and move on to another egg and sperm, you know, and you want that egg and sperm to be in a nice human body so you can carry on the very least with another human rebirth, so you can, you know, keep moving without too much interference on your spiritual path. I mean, that's the approach, you know. So what are the conditions then that are conducive to that? Well, the very first one will be if you've got your grandmother or somebody, you know, or even your pussycat, same thing. It needs to be peaceful, quiet, and it needs to be conducive. So that means when, like if it's your loved one in a bed, when they open their eyes, what they see and the sounds they hear should be peaceful. Instead of having other people chatting away, oh, she's in a coma, she can't hear. But this is something too that's really important. The function of the more subtle level of mind that we don't posit as existing. We don't posit it in the same way in the West in neuroscience. But when you're asleep or when you're in a coma, that's when your subtle consciousness, which is your mental states, they can still be very vividly aware. And we know that from their experiences, people who have dreams. You can be dreaming, but stay at the same time vividly aware of things that are going on around you. And that's the same with comas for sure. I remember somebody recently sent me a very fascinating story. I forget what state, somewhere. This young man was shot and they said he was, you know, brain dead. And he eventually, this one young, his surgeon, somehow there's some very dramatic story. It was very fascinating. I just read it quickly. He was on the table ready to have his organs cut. He was a young man, 24. And the surgeon comes barging in. Take him off immediately. Stop that. He was his main surgeon. He hadn't even known. The process was so unorganized. He hadn't even known that he was on the table ready to have his organs cut. You know, and he said he is not, and he didn't die. In fact, he came out of it. And he talked later about being conscious the whole time in the bed, hearing his mother crying, and they're singing prayers, and they're saying he's playing his favorite music, and he's trying, he said, in every way possible to show them he was alive. He'd tap the bed and he'd hear them say, oh, that's just the nerves. He's not alive. He can't hear. And this doctor, he's a seasoned and wonderful doctor. He said, we don't know enough about consciousness. And that's what I remember telling people, I think, and I read this while I was editing Lama Zopa's book. I read a book by an American journalist whose expertise is death. And he'd done it was all about this exact thing, that now as a result of the business of harvesting organs, because we have so little, he's noticing we have so many contradictions and confusions now about when death actually is. What is the consciousness? I remember a doctor, he quoted in his book, he's a very funny fellow, it's called The Undead. And he quoted all these experiences of people, you know, and this one doctor who's in this industry, he said, I can now say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain. I don't know what it is, but that I can say. And this doctor said the same thing. So, and it's because of this taking organs that they're now seeing they don't know when death is. They used to be so, you know, so clear about it once. And that completely fits with the Buddhist view. That once you stop breathing, you're not dead yet. The consciousness is still there, you know. And he had a whole chapter of people who have out-of-body experiences while they're having their operation. So, okay, so in the Vajrayana system, the way they describe it, you've got gross consciousness, which is your senses, which is pretty obvious. And that's linked to the gross body. There's your consciousness, your eye consciousness, and they're not physical. We're talking about the eyeball. We're talking about that part of your mind that's that works in dependence upon the body to have sensory experiences. That's the gross level. So when that's ceased, and that's when the breath stops, that's when the brain death is. But the mind is still there. And that's what they're discovering. More and more of these people, they're discovering they're not dead yet. They don't know what it is. They just don't know what it is because they don't talk like this. The neuroscientific view does not have these views. So I think it's amazing that people are now discussing it. Do you understand? And so the Buddhist approach, this approach we're discussing here, is it can be your gross consciousness ceases, and then your mental states are still there. So that's what they refer to that as subtle consciousness. And this process of death, from gross to the subtle to what they call the very subtle, it's a gradual process of deconstruction of the components of the person. So it's very similar to the process of sleep. So when you stop breathing, it's equivalent to when you've gone to sleep. You're still breathing, you're not, but the grosser senses have ceased. We know that your eyes don't work. If someone touches you when you're fast asleep, it doesn't, you don't feel it, you know. But you have dreams, and that's your more subtle level of your mental consciousness. And that's what is there still in this man's case. He was aware, you know. I remember even reading about some Italian lady, mother, years ago. She kept her son plugged in for 25 years in a coma. And he came out of his coma and he said he was conscious the whole time. 25 years. Can you imagine the poor man? Mm-hmm. So really it does show, you know, there's no awareness of what consciousness is. And these are the things that bring up the contradictions. That experience of that young man was very amazing. And this doctor was so courageous. He could have lost his job, you know. And he said that himself, he was trying desperately the whole time to show them he was still alive. They said, oh no, it's just a nervous reaction. No, he's not noticing. Even though he answered questions by tapping, by blinking his eyes. So people just have assumptions, you know. It's very fascinating, isn't it? Anyway, this fits with the Buddhist view. And that's why you leave your dog as well, for at least 3 days. And there are ways of checking whether the consciousness is actually gone based upon this way they describe. It's very interesting. Anyway, in terms of helping, the main thing is for your pussycat as well to keep or the little bird you find on the street, keep it quiet, keep it peaceful. Because one of the things is as we get sicker or as we get older, our mind gets more sensitive. Somehow you can see when people are so fragile, you know, your senses are ceasing, you can't hear so well, but just your mental consciousness is still very vivid. And you can be very, and especially if you're sick and dying, you can be incredibly susceptible to the tiniest sounds. You know, you need to be incredibly quiet. Lama Zopa stresses the room should be beautiful. So if you open your eyes, or like if you're a Buddhist, you'd have images of the Buddha, you'd have lovely sounds of prayers. Everything should be conducive for you to be peaceful. And it really makes sense, you know. Not just because it feels nice, it's because it helps that person when the death process starts, because their mind is peaceful. When the time is coming, that peaceful mind is the conducive environment in which the virtuous karmic seed can be triggered. So this means you have to understand a bit about karma. And we don't factor that in, of course, in the modern world. And that means basically everything we think and do and say programs our mind, stays in our mind as imprints or tendencies, the way they talk, you know, or karmic seeds. The best analogy to use. And this, of course, from countless past lives, trillions of karmic seeds. The Buddha would say our mind goes back and back and back. And that one of those karmic seeds, we want one of the virtuous ones. So what that basically means, we have to understand karma. We've either got non-virtuous, neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based states of mind, like anger and all the nonsense. And then the actions we do on the basis of those which harm others. I mean, look at the universe. They leave seeds in the mind, imprints. And we don't want one of those to be triggered. This is very clear, because every one of those is like a seed that will bring a fruit. And the first way that karma ripens is as a type of rebirth. A type of rebirth, you know, human, animal, and there are other options. We want, the very least, another human body. So we want a virtuous karmic seed. And that means a virtuous karmic seed of the non-harming tendencies, especially non-killing. These seeds to be triggered. And the second way our karma ripens within the particular life is the tendencies in our mind. The third way our karma ripens is the experiences we have at the hands of others. And the fourth way our karma ripens is is the environment we live in. And all of this is created by us. It's not random, it's natural law, it's not punishment, not reward. So this is not the way we think of life at all. So it really takes time to think this one and to use this as the basis of our life, you know, and to therefore factor it in now when we're talking about death. So the most conducive environment is to have your loved one in the room. If they're Buddhists, you know, have images around. Any sounds they hear should be the sounds of, say, prayers and mantras, because that helps their mind to be calm. And with the animal as well. I mean, and this means also we have to understand attachment energy. And this is, again, not something we think about too much. So the Lama Zopa says the the most suffering at death is caused by attachment. Well, attachment is way more subtle than we imagine, but mainly it's the attachment, not to even to your loved ones, not to your possessions, but attachment to the body, because we think this is me, don't we? There's intense grasping at this, you know, the horror, just like, and it's primordially deep. The not wanting to let go of this, you know. So because of that, that brings fear. The reason most people have fear of death is because of attachment, not wanting to let, as we say, let go, you know. So therefore, as much as you can, to make the environment peaceful for them so they can relax. And therefore also to whatever they hear or see, especially the hear and see, to be things that will trigger their mind to be peaceful, not their attachment. So therefore, lamas, all the Tibetans would recommend you keep the pets out of the room. Now that's the worst thing for the West because we love our pets most. Want to have our pussycat there, you know. But somehow because in our culture we don't distinguish between love and attachment. We think we love our pet, and we do, but it's usually intense attachment. And for the person who's dying, for the animal as well, it should be conducive for them to be relaxed, calm, not attached, not anxious, not angry, you know. So, for example, you keep the troublemakers out of the room. I mean, you hear terrible stories. Like I remember this one family, two sides of the bed of the daddy dying, screaming about the will. I mean, you hear the most nightmarish stories. That, oh man, can you imagine dying like that, you know? Or crying and grasping at the dying person. It's about the worst thing you can possibly do. So the key thing is to make it a peaceful environment. Even the Buddhists have Buddhist images, sounds, I mean, prayers, mantras, because then, and for the animal too, because there's the animal, they're anxious probably, like everybody, there's fear there. It's very inarticulate. So if you make them feel secure and loving and calm for them, they calm down. But if you hear mantras or sounds that are very peaceful, it kind of can focus the mind rather than having the mind all berserk, you know. I remember this woman I went to see in California. I haven't been married dying people. Well, my sister's been to sort of 24 weddings and about 24 funerals. I think I've been to one funeral in my life, you know, no weddings. Maybe one wedding. I don't know. I seem to have missed them. Anyway, this woman I saw in California, she's sort of vaguely Buddhist, or she liked Lama Yeshe, and she was dying of cancer. And you could tell she was in the bed and she had so much fear. She was on her own. Friends were rotating, coming, sort of helping her. And you could feel her fear. She's so distressed and tossing and turning and didn't know what to think, didn't know what to do, you know, had no particular view, really anxious. And I thought, well, what do I do, you know? So I just thought, okay, I'll just sing a mantra. Just sing a mantra, you know, calm her down. And as soon as we all know if you hear a pleasant sound, it can calm you. If you see loud, jarring sounds, you're so agitated. So I just remember singing "Oh Money Baby Home." Anyway, I had to go. And that's right, they had the television on the whole time. They kept the television on. That's what you see in old people's homes, the television blasting, this garbage dumping out of it, thinking, oh, you've got to distract them, you know? I mean, it's horrible, just horrible. So the television on the whole time. So because she said she liked Lama Yeshe, I left her the old-fashioned thing, not a disc, the previous one, a tape, you know? You put them in the computer, that one. What are they called?
CDs?
No, before the CD.
Cassette tape?
A cassette tape, yeah, a video cassette tape. And I gave it to them to play Lama Yeshe. And when they finally tried to get it after I left, they got it in. Then the television stopped working. So something was peaceful, and she died in like an hour. Because when there's no energy, see, if there's something out there shouting and yelling at you, you can go inside. But if there's something out there, your mind goes to it. Do you understand? So if there's something out there that's good, it can be peaceful, it calms you down. So because there's nothing there, Hermione was able to relax. Do you understand? Peaceful. And as Lama Zopa says, as they're getting closer to death, nothing should be heard in that room except like prayers and mantras, if it's a Buddhist. Because whatever you do hear, especially the hearing one, because even if you can't see, those people in comas, they couldn't see, but they could hear still, you know? I remember this friend of mine in Sydney, I always say this one, she was in a coma in the hospital, and her husband asked the people in the ER if I could come in and see her, and I decided I'd go at night because it was a long way to drive. It was easier at night. And he told them that I was a Buddhist nun, And they said, when I arrived, they said, please don't play any bells. And I promised I wouldn't play any bells. So I just lie there. There was Judy plugged in everywhere, you know. And then before I came, she wasn't really a Buddhist, but she had all these Buddhist things, and she was close to a couple of Tibetan lamas. And I remember I'd asked the lamas' students to contact the lamas and to pray for Judy. So every now and again, I'd go there day after day, and I'd whisper in her ear prayers, and then every now and again I'd say, Judy, His Holiness Sakya Trinzman's praying for you. Judy, Songsa Khense Rinpoche is praying for you. I'd say that every now and again. Anyway, she came out of a coma weeks later or something, which was all perky and bright. And she told me the only thing she remembered, she said it was this husky voice. No one had told her. I hadn't told anybody. You know, it was me. And she thought it was a blue lady coming through the window saying exactly those words. She quoted them back to me. Now, you can't argue with things like that. Do you understand? Do you understand? And this guy in the death book, this man called Nick Teresi, in this book called The Undead, showing all the difficulties and contradictions in this area of medicine in this country. This is a few years ago. Repeating this exactly what that doctor said. People don't know when death is now. It's confusing, you know. So he had a whole chapter on people who have out-of-body experiences. And of course, nobody believes them. You know, they saw what the doctor did. They always report being above their bed, floating and watching. You know, that's how they will experience. Or people who have dreams and things like that. That's how they. So technically, the mind hasn't left the body, but it's the experience of your subtle mind. Because if you think about memories, a memory's like that. You sort of always you're looking above or you're looking at it somehow. You're not in it. You're seeing a picture of it almost. Do you understand what I'm saying? When you think of a memory. And a dream the same. So that's the experience of your mental consciousness, your subtle consciousness, when the gross senses have ceased, because your mind becomes more subtle. That's what many people have, these experiences in dreams and things. So these people reporting their experiences and watching what the doctors were doing, the music they played, the jokes they cracked while they were cutting out their whatever it was. But this particular woman, he joked about it, and he said she had to have such a radical procedure that from their perspective, they had to calm down all her organs, stop them working. And from their perspective, there was no way she could be conscious. But he joked and said she reported the most vivid out-of-body experience. So you just can't argue with these things, which is, I think it's great. It's forcing people to assess their assumptions. And that's exactly what that experience of this young man that I just read recently. It was actually in a medical journal. It was very interesting. So people are really looking at it. I think it's wonderful. So this one other experience is so very fascinating. He mentioned this woman who was going to give okay, so what happens is when you die and you stop the breathing, okay, the death process from this perspective is described in sort of 8 stages, gradual deconstruction of the components of a person. So the first 4 stages, your earth element ceases, your I consciousness ceases, particular level of your mind ceases. They talk about these things, and one of the elements, like the earth element, ceases. The second level is your ears, the water element. Different things happen. They describe it all step by step. And by the 4th stage, you stop breathing, and that's when they call it death. That's when they say it's death. But that's your gross consciousness has ceased. And that's when they're going to take your organs, that's when they plug you in to keep you breathing. So as Lama Zopa says in his chapter in the book, because in the book, one of the sections in the back is the different scenarios in which your loved one could die, what to do if your loved one dies at home, what to do if your loved one dies in hospital, what to do if your loved one dies suddenly, what to do if your loved one's giving their organs. It's the same advice, but the different scenarios for the people, you know, so you can look it up. So this one, you know, it's where if you're going to give your organs, they keep you breathing. And then, of course, they say you're dead, but we're keeping you breathing. But as Lama Zopa points out, if you can continue to breathe, even artificially, and the body is still warm, then it means the mind is still there. You couldn't, and if they were technically dead, it means the mind actually has left the body. And if that's the case, and that could happen immediately sometimes in some people, then no matter how much you plug them in, they won't breathe. You understand? So anyway, this particular woman in the book, he reported this event. There she was, I plugged her in, she was giving her organs, and she was on the table, and the nurse who was monitoring the heartbeat said that the moment they got the circular saw to cut her open, she can't feel anything, right? Because she's like unconscious, like as if you're an anesthetic. her heart went from 100 to 200 beats a minute. So and they just say, and he cracked a joke and said, what has a dead person got to worry about? But we can deduce on this, in this method, that her subtle consciousness was still there. And it's just like being under anesthetic. Her mind is still there, or she's in a dream when she's noticing what's happening. So she still thinks she's still alive, of course she is. And then she's seeing they're going to cut her open, so she's having a panic attack. What are they doing, cutting me open? Do you understand? And that's the problem. As Lama says in the end, in this chapter, the hospitals need to be careful, because the only reason giving organs is difficult is in a situation like hers, where she's still conscious. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Not at a sensory level, but at the subtle level, which we don't posit in the West, like that young man. Do you understand me? But if you just have most people won't have that experience. I mean, I never had an out-of-body experience while I went under anesthetic. It was the nicest sleep I've ever had. I wish I could get over the counter, you know? Do you understand? I remember it vividly. Completely dead sleep. It was wonderful. So that's the only reason it could be difficult. And why that's even difficult is simply because as you go through the death process, about the second of the first four stages is when the particular karmic seed that will determine your next life is triggered. So if you're peaceful, if you're someone's helping you die peacefully and you're starting your death process, by the time you stop, before you stop breathing, the karmic seed that determines your next life is already triggered. So if you're freaking out, then it'll trigger a negative seed. You're going to get an unhappy rebirth. You don't want that. But she probably died peacefully, because her motivation was very pure. But then her mind is still there. She's programmed to get a decent rebirth, but things can change. So she's on the table. She has a freak out when they see that they're going to cut her open, and that can change the karma. And she has a panic attack, and negative karma can be triggered, and she get a lower realm rebirth. That's the reason why this is a difficult thing. But of course, you've got to have this view to even factor that in. It sounds so complicated. Do you understand what I'm saying? Any questions so far? I don't know why I'm talking. Go on, yeah.
Well, yeah, I have experience in this.
Can we have the microphone so the people on the Zoom can hear?
Is that one? Wait, yeah, I was.
Is it a question or you're going to tell me something?
Well, I guess the question
Yeah, go.
is about the bardo.
Oh, I see. Go on.
When I learned about it, what I learned.
Yeah.
Seems impossible to navigate that without.
No, it is. No, you're totally. Oh, without the what?
A body.
No. Okay. So navigate meaning do something with it. No, that's why you see that all the advice they have, often there's advice.
What was the question?
Huh?
What was the question?
Okay, let me finish the description of what roughly happens, and then I'll point to what you're saying. So they go through the death process, and then by the fourth stage, your breath stops. Then you go, and then the mind gets more subtle, and eventually, and this system would say after maybe 3 days, your very subtle consciousness, which is imprinted with all your karmic seeds, then leaves the body. And then it kind of does a reverse process of kind of waking up as if, you know how when you go to sleep, you then wake up in a dream, don't you? And then you wake up. So there's this middle stage of dream, which is your subtle consciousness. And that's what they call it intermediate state. This is what she referred to as the bardo, a Tibetan word, intermediate state. And this is what they say. By the time when your mind leaves the body, you then come to this reverse wake up into this state, which is just exactly like a dream state. It's exactly like a dream state. And depending on the karma that it's been triggered for your future rebirth, it could be very intense and like a nightmare, or it could be quite peaceful, but in general, very weird. We all know dreams are kind of weird, aren't they? You don't have much control in dreams. So that's intermediate state, so basically like a dream. So unless you're highly realized and a highly advanced practitioner, most people can do nothing about it. Like you can't do anything in a dream, you can't control your dreams, you can't know what you're doing, and unless you're advanced. So what's the question in particular?
Yeah, the question is, what I learned about the bardo, there are sounds, there are visuals.
It's like a dream state, darling. It's exactly the same as a dream. It's exactly the same as dreaming.
And is it true that in that state, that is, I better navigate that?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's if you go to sleep now and have a dream, if you can't control that dream and don't even know you're dreaming, then you can't do it at death. So forget it. It's for advanced practitioners. Are you hearing me?
So I don't
Are
have
you
to
here?
worry, I don't have to worry about that then.
No, you just die peacefully and get a decent human rebirth, a karma to be triggered, and then you have a nice bardo, and then your mummy and daddy come along, hop into bed, and you hop in and you off you go. So don't worry about it.
I never heard that the karmic seed could be,
What, sweetheart?
I never heard that the karmic seed for the next life could be so quick.
As what? Quick as
And
what?
what you said, when the person dies, it could happen right then and there.
No, what I'm saying is, when at the time of death,
Yeah,
at about the second or third of the 8 stages of this deconstruction, that is when the karmic seed that will be triggered, that's now ready to send you to the next rebirth. Yeah, that's because it's never longer than a few weeks before you get a new rebirth, ever.
so I don't have to worry about making mistakes in the bardo.
Forget the bardo, darling. It's too late to think about it. If you can't manage your dreams, you can't manage the bardo. So just live your life well, so you die peacefully, so a virtuous karmic seed will be triggered, so you get a decent human rebirth, and just the bardo will take care of itself. Don't worry about it.
All right.
Do you understand? Are we following? What's the question?
Can
Yeah.
you clarify, like, all the stuff you did before, didn't do before?
Start again. I missed you.
Can you clarify all the stuff you did before, didn't do, before you died? And then suddenly you have like a bad experience at death.
Yes, right, yeah.
So what is that in relation to everything that happened before?
Okay. This first, I hear you. There's trillions of seeds in our mind. If we imagine that everything we ever think and do and say, even just in this life, leaves seeds in your mind. Nothing goes astray. That's the key thing to understand. Now, so forget of all the past life ones, they're all there, buried, right? So there you are living in this life, you do your best to live a good life. If you are doing your best to lead a good life, and practicing virtue, living in vows, then I'd say your death will be reasonable. Your death will be good because you're prepared for it. If you have trained in driving for 20, 30 years, driving properly, it's likely you won't have an accident. It's likely, it'll be fine. It's not like good luck or bad luck. So if you spend your life practicing virtue, living in vows and being a good person, realizing impermanence and living a good life and practicing virtue every day and purifying your negative karma, your death will be peaceful. It can't not be. It's logic, it's a law, If you spend your life doing gardening, all the proper weeding and all the proper flowering and all the proper things, your garden will turn out as you plan. It's not random. But on the other hand, if you just spend your life not being conscious, not practicing virtue, following your feelings, being negative when you feel like it, positive, not, a bit of positivity, then you've never thought of anything. Death will be horrible because you never thought about it.
So what's all the focus on this, on the very, very last stages of life? I mean, does it
What,
seems
I'll
like-
say it again, what?
What's all the focus that you have on all the very last stages of life when it seems so small compared to everything that came before?
It's not saying that. It's not a question of that. It's saying technically, it's just saying it's a technical point. It's a technical point. Okay, if you've spent 25 years practicing driving, if you're about to have some drama on the freeway, you're more equipped than if you'd never practiced. Would you agree with that? Well, that moment on the freeway is a kind of a crucial moment, isn't it? And it's dependent on how you've driven all your last 20 years. Same here. It's not like random out of the blue, Do you see my point? It's a technical point. Then you're more prepared to deal with the dramas on the freeway. So if you've spent your life practicing virtue, it's most likely a virtuous seed will be ready. You've prepared for it. It's natural. Can you hear the point?
So it's not really much different than any other point in your life. Because you have to make.
Well, there's a lot more
choices.
fear there because you're going to die and no one wants to die. I've got lots of fear. So you need to be extra careful. That's why taking care of your loved ones and loving them and helping them be relaxed and your animals too, because the fear is very primordial at that point. And if you can help the person be peaceful and virtuous and make them feel safe, that's the best thing you can do for your pet or your loved one. And then they'll be more relaxed when the time comes. And then a virtuous karmic seed can be triggered. Are you with me? Or not? Sort of.
I'm learning.
I mean, me too, believe me. Go, sweetheart.
What about pain? What about pain?
What about pain? What's the question?
What about if the person that's dying
Yeah, has pain, it's
has
terrible.
pain
I
and
agree. Terrible.
they have pain medication?
Yeah, terrible. Okay. So this is where, again, the bottom line is to try and, the other thing is to try and help. It's best to die with awareness. People in the West say, I hope I die in my sleep, because they don't want to know about it. But that's about the worst, because you need to be conscious. It's like, if you're, going to drive at 100 miles an hour on the freeway, you better be conscious. Don't say, oh, I just want to die in my sleep and I'll close my eyes. No way. You want to be conscious. So the whole thing is to help them work out how to balance. And this is what they do anyway. The painkiller with keeping some awareness, Because when your mind, I know one time when I was in hospital, I used to have these weird arthritic attacks. And I remember in one hospital, in Israel, they just zapped steroids into me and it was wonderful. The pain went away immediately. You have these nightmarish pains. But this other hospital I went to in Melbourne, they refused to give me steroids. It was very boring of them. So they put me on this morphine and things, and I was in this terrible state. I was like hallucinating. And I thought, I do not want to die like this. No way. Hallucinating with no control over your mind. So if you've practiced all your life and you thought about impermanence and more aware of it, and when death time comes, you're facing it, you're more relaxed because you're facing it. Then if there is pain, you can be on some drug, but you want to be conscious. The best is to be conscious and alert. That's the best. But that doesn't always follow. Some people die with terrible pain. I mean, terrible pain. It's so sad. What can you do? Do you understand? Yeah. What else, people? Yes, Elaine, this sweet. Eileen, this sweetheart.
Yes, thank you. So my understanding that what goes on in the bardo.
We have some noise a bit louder somewhere. Is it on the computer or where? Please, a bit more noise. Eileen.
Oh. Is it okay to talk now?
Well, speak up a bit. I can't hear you, so we can manage, but speak up a bit, yeah.
All right, so I'm understanding that what goes on in the bardo, this dream state, is not what determines the circumstances of your next rebirth.
No, not necessarily. No, that's right, exactly. That's already determined before you stop breathing. The karmic seed that will be triggered, that determines your next life, is triggered about at the second and third stages of the death before you even stop breathing.
Right.
And the way they say, the way you die can be an indication of whether it's a negative or positive seed. So some people die like, I heard so many stories. And a friend of mine a nun in Queensland, in a city called Cairns, she sits with the dying people. And she had one experience of this one man, she'd never seen anything like it. He was dying, and all of a sudden he became like this demon. His eyes went up into his head, they became red, and he was looking as if he was seeing the worst nightmare, like he was in absolute horror. So what happens is because, when our mind gets more subtle, then we go to sleep, and that's a dream. Now, some people having terrible dreams. They have nightmares every night. They're seeing demons, and and they even, you hear all these stories. When your mind is more subtle, meaning when the senses have ceased, your mind is much more sensitive to all kinds of, influences. So if there are some negative karmic seeds in there, and then he died, and the negative karmic seed was triggered for him, and he was beginning the death process, that can trigger a negative karmic seed, which could be born in a hell realm, this fearful, nightmarish experience. And he was seeing it, literally, you're seeing it coming. Now, what happened was, he then calmed down, and he died peacefully. And her Lama said that it's probably, he purified some negative karma, and then he was able to die peacefully after all. So it shifted. But you hear many people, on the other hand, who die with delight and radiance and peaceful, and they look into the distance as if they're seeing the most divine thing on the planet. Because what's happened is a virtuous karmic seed has been triggered, the senses begin to cease, your mind is more sensitive, and you literally are seeing your future life coming, like some radiant, blissful experience. I always remember Steve Jobs. I love this story. I love Steve Jobs. And he knew for years that he was dying. He had some kind of cancer. And you could tell from how he wrote and the way he talked that he was very aware of impermanence, And I happen to know that one time when I read a memoir of one of his children from a previous marriage, and she went to see him one day, and there was this Tibetan monk, and it's actually he's a friend of mine. I can't remember his name. He's a monk, and he was recognized by Lucky Rinpoche as a reincarnated Lama. I can't think of his name, but he's my friend. He's Brazilian or something. And he done healing type things, and he was there with Steve Jobs. So I'm not saying Steve Jobs was a Buddhist, but he was obviously aware of those things. Anyway, the interesting point was his sister, they met each other later in life because they'd all been given away at birth, whatever you call that, you know. Anyway, she wrote about how he died, and I'll never forget. It was very fascinating. Said they rang her and said, "You better come. He's dying soon." So she got there that day, and the way she said it was so interesting. She said he was packed, ready to go. I thought that was wonderful. I mean, mentally he was ready, you know. And his two daughters were there, and she described how, like, you know, let's say I'm the sister, and I'm watching Steve, who's facing me, and his two daughters are in front of Steve, and he's talking to them. But I can see their heads. Can you visualize? And I'm watching and the sister's watching him. And she said he looked so radiant and full of love and compassion, or whatever the words were. And he was looking into the eyes of his daughters, begging them to forgive him for having to leave them. But it's very loving. And then she said he suddenly looked over their shoulders into the distance and went, "Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow." And then he died. Now, it's such a hilarious story. So I'm deducing from that he had a very quick death. He's upright, he's radiant, there's enormous love and compassion in his mind. That's the trigger that triggers a virtuous karmic seed, maybe for a pure land, who knows? And suddenly his mind's more subtle, and he's literally seeing it. And you hear many stories like that before they even stop breathing. You're already seeing it coming. So dying in a very, and they even say in the text, Rinpoche says there are 5, you scream, you hallucinate, you imagine like you're hallucinating, seeing monsters, you shit and you piss and you vomit or whatever, because you're so horrified. Or you can die radiantly and blissfully, because your mind's getting more subtle and you can see the future, sort of thing. That's how they describe. Do you understand? I'm just telling you what they say, darling. Leave it or take it, doesn't matter. I'm just, do you understand, people?
Yeah.
Understand?
So, Robina, could I just ask one more question? So how we die, the circumstances of our death itself must be something about our karmic seeds, no? In other words,
what it means, Eileen, is we've got billions of karmic seeds in our little bank vault.
yes.
And we want a virtuous one to be triggered. So a conducive condition for a virtuous karmic seed to be triggered is peace and relaxed. If you've got negative and positive tendencies in your mind, and I come along and want to punch you in the nose, and you haven't practiced much, anger will arise, won't it? Well, if you've got fear of death, anger will arise, and that'll trigger a negative seed. So for practical purposes, if you're going 100 miles an hour on the freeway, you need 20 years of practice and a calm mind, so you can navigate the drama. So the seed that will be triggered is determined by the way you are.
Yes.
So we want a virtuous one to be triggered. So take care of your the mouse. Make the mouse peaceful. Say mantras to it. Your loved one, your auntie, whoever it might be. It's not a kind of like the last one counts and you're a naughty girl or a bad girl. It's just a practical thing. Do you understand me, Eileen?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
But once that's there and it hasn't manifested yet, it's just been triggered, ready to find your new mummy and daddy haven't hopped into bed yet. But then that woman who was on the bed in the hospital, unconscious, dead, they said, and she sees, the circular saw cutting her open. She knows she's not dead yet, so she has a panic attack, and her heart goes to 200 beats a minute. Do you understand? That's when it can shift the karma, and that can then trigger a negative seed, and then she dies. And that's not cool. And that's the one reason why giving organs mightn't be so sensible. I mean, many people won't have that experience. And Lama Zopa, all the Lamas praise people for giving their organs, so compassionate, But this can disturb their mind at the time of death. Do you understand, Eileen?
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you.
So then, what happens, so you were saying it takes about 3 days for the consciousness to actually leave the body. So what happens to people that die in the hospital and they, declare dead and their bodies?
That's how most of the people die. It's a tragedy.
Yeah, so what happens to that?
Well, it can disturb the mind, like the lady on the bed. That's the point. grabbing the body, chuck it in the morgue, burn it. I mean, look at all those stories of people. It's like a joke. People who come out, who, that's one of the things that the doctor quoted. So many experiences of people coming back to life. While they're even in the Victorian days, you talk about in England, they used to put a little bell in the bloody coffin. So when you wake up, you can ring it. Can you imagine the horror? I mean, Ramazoba quotes one man in Nepal. It was so common, he looked like he died. They put him in the funeral pyre. He wakes up again, like half a dozen times it happened. You can have these experiences. This is what they're talking about now, these doctors. That's what the problem was with this man. People aren't dead yet. And then it's like he was being sarcastic. He was very sarcastic about it. He was very negative about the industry, this author. That is very, a lot can be very arrogant, very pushy, very bossy. Even in Europe now, the default law is that you give your organs. You have to sign a thing to please don't take my organs, you know. So it's very aggressive. And he was very critical of it, the industry in general. Because it's so, just so ignorant in many ways. I mean, these examples, you know. And the same report I read about this doctor, he was saying the same thing. People are very cynical about it. To be just really conscious. Because it's just this unawareness, terrible unawareness. And not even noticing the signs. This man's tapping on the bed. He's blinking his eyes. They say, blink twice if the answer's yes. And he did. And they just ignored him. Do you understand? It's so rude. So don't give your organs. That's how I'm deciding. I give my dead. Not my, they want my old organs anyway. But you understand. Any other questions, people? No. Nothing? Yeah, go.
A lot
Microphone, please.
A lot of the stuff seems very hard to know. How is it known?
Okay, if this were a cooking class, would you ask that question? And if you did ask the question, what would be the answer? The question will be, where do you get this information from, Robina? And what would be the answer? If it was a proper cooking, if it was a cooking class, or a mathematics class, or a building class, or an engineering class, or a music class, and the teacher's telling you certain things, and you would say, where does this information come from? What would they tell you? What would they tell you?
Cooked before.
What?
I've made a cake before, whatever.
And they study, and they come from teachers who made cakes, and they go back to the previous cake maker. It's knowledge passed down from human to human. If it's not that, we're in bloody trouble. And that's the problem, because of religious knowledge, people think it's made up rubbish coming from the sky. That's the problem. That's why you ask the question. That's the assumption about religious knowledge. It's just made up stuff. That's why people just decide they go to a weekend course, have a meditation experience, and write a bloody book. The arrogance of it in the West is because we can just think, oh, anyone can think what they like. I'm talking on the basis of 3,000 years of bodies of knowledge. It's all there. We've said this every time to you, but you always forget it.
But it's a little different. Like I can see in a day-to-day life, if I do something, something happens.
It's
right?
not different at all. It's
No,
understanding what the
but
mind is.
it's not-
You and karma.
How would someone know something when they're not alive, right?
In heaven, if you take the whole, I'm not being impatient. This whole, every word you hear in this room is based on the Buddha's view about what mind is, which is not physical, about the view of reincarnation, about the view of karma, all of these things. And then it's knowledge that's coming from the experience of people who've observed it. You have to take that as a
If
possibility.
you're not alive, how would one observe it?
Probably Jesus, God, you pass on the knowledge because you know from the past. You're conscious when you go through the meditations. People can replicate all these meditations before they die. They're clairvoyant. That's all part of the literature. It's been there since the Hindus have all this information as well. It's all in the literature. It's all there, coming from the direct experience of people, just like the music knowledge. That's what, but we don't posit that kind of mind in neuroscience. And you always ask, and that's fine, ask your questions from the perspective of being a modern Western person who's got a brain and nothing else. Isn't it? I mean, you always ask the right questions, but it's all based upon the view of, this is Buddha's view, based on knowledge. If it's not that, then I think that would be the worst ignorance of all, for me to sit here and make up all this rubbish. I'm telling you what I've studied, that's it. From passing on from people who have the experience of it, which is any body of knowledge if it's valid.
Okay, but taking it from the outside, a lot of people think,
Outside.
well, as a non-Buddhist, I guess, right? Like a lot of people say a lot of things
It's up to you to do your market research and check that where you go to hear this information and what books you read is coming from valid sources. That's your call. That's your decision. You need to be confident that what you hear in this place has any basis in reality. That's your decision. Do you hear my point now? You've got to do your market research, your due diligence. That's your job. That's your job. That's your job. Can you hear me? Thank you. Next question. I might be talking vomit, garbage, but you need to find out and have some kind of confidence. Anyone can be this way. Anybody could be a yoga teacher, could be a music teacher, could be a karate teacher. You have to find out and have confidence that they're talking proper. That's why we do due diligence, serious due diligence. But when it comes to religious knowledge, we're just full of garbage. People believe anything they're told and they want to sue them when they get upset.
Well, that's my point.
What is your point?
If a lot of it's garbage, people say a lot of stuff.
That's exactly, and they do, vomit and garbage. There's garbage and garbage written under the name of Buddhism. There's garbage out there, garbage, stuff that people make up. You're right. So then the onus is on us to do our due diligence and have confidence if we dare to want to enter into a path and don't waste our life. That's the onus is on us to do that. Whose else responsibility is it except mine to do that job for myself if I'm going to follow some teachers? Like any music teacher, yoga teacher, or Buddhist teacher, same principle. Is it not true what I'm saying?
I'm not sure.
What aren't you sure about? Which piece? No, it's a good discussion, but you've got to be clear. What piece theoretically are you not clear about?
You seem to be saying something that doesn't seem to be knowable.
You're basing something's not being knowable on your view of what the mind is. I'm telling you what's knowable according to the Buddhist view of the mind. So if you're interested in this, you need to look at what the Buddhist view says, what the mind is, coming from the literature. It's all there for you to discover if you want it, Ted. It's up to you. You always come with the same questions, and I'm happy to answer them the same answer every time. You need to do your investigation to see if it's a possibility what the Dalai Lama and his mob teach is come and go back to the Buddha. It's knowledge that's been around for 3,000 years. These Indians 3,000 years ago were the ones who first identified the mind at this level. It's 3,000-year-old literature. It's up to you to decide if you're interested in seeing if it's valid, Ted. You do that work. I can't make you do that. So every time you ask questions, I'll just repeat my answers until you decide to do your market research. But you keep coming back. Are we communicating?
I mean, I understand what you're saying.
Good. Okay then. So sweetheart, there's either something useful here or there's not for you. What can I tell you? What else, people? Yes, Azul.
Thank you, Venerable Robina. My question would be, you mentioned that having a peaceful, quiet environment is the most conducive.
I can't hear you so well. Talk clearly.
You mentioned that having the most peaceful environment is most conducive upon death. What would you advise, or how can we prepare our loved ones to have that environment for us with no attachment to us, with no noise?
All you can do is do your best to practice yourself and let your wishes be known. People do that. Don't they call it a living will these days? Isn't that what people say?
Mm.
People do that, write out exactly the situation you want. People do that now, I think. You need to, it's important.
Mm-hmm.
It's like writing a will, but like this living with the way you want to die, what you should do, don't touch me until then. People do that more and more, I've heard, these days. Explaining exactly.
I guess just be also okay with the idea that it could also not happen.
What, sweetheart?
Also be okay with the idea that that environment cannot happen because it's out of our control.
I mean, what can you do? That's right. That's why you got to work on your mind. That's exactly right. Exactly. Do our best, isn't it? Yeah, exactly, sweetheart. What does that say? 2:30, 3:30. 1 o'clock Tuesday, it's time to finish. So then people, I mean, I didn't talk hardly much anything, I just said a few words. Ted, I can't get over you. You're so intelligent. You ask the same thing every time. You mean you've never looked into you've never even read Buddhist books about the mind, Ted. You haven't, you can't have, if you ask those questions. You can't have read all those books about what the mind is. You can't have looked at any of them.
Look, if I go to a Catholic priest, I go to read the Quran, or
They'll all say the same thing.
they're all gonna tell me something.
But
Different, but
Ted,
not-
every mathematician will tell you that. Every yoga teacher will tell you that. Every kind of musician will tell you that. Every kind of philosopher will tell you their knowledge. The onus is on us, Ted. Do you want to be spoon-fed? I don't think so, but you talk like it's the onus is on other people to tell you the truth so you can be comfortable. That's pathetic. The onus is on you to work out which piece of information you want to help you in your life. That's up to you, Ted. You have, if the knowledge that someone gives you is valid, whether it's music or cooking, when you do your research, you will find the knowledge is there and you can track it back to the sources, which gives you confidence that the teacher is giving you valid information. But that's up to you to decide. You keep forgetting you have to play a role in this. You just want to believe something. Well, then if you don't, start looking at the literature. And then you have to open your mind to the possibility, as I always keep saying, that I'm going to decide, I have decided that the Buddhist view is my working hypothesis. My mind is open to that. That means I study the theories, and then theories have to lead to experience. There's no way I've said it to you all before. You hear that 1 + 1 is 2. The only way you're open to that, instead of, oh, how do I know that's true? You have to be open to the possibility it might be true. Then you hear it and then you go and prove it. Well, E = mc² is the same. Reincarnation is the same. Rebirth is the same. Karma is the same. Non-physicality of mind, it's the same principle. There's a bunch of theories. And also the other point is, if any body of knowledge is valid, first, it must be coherent theoretically. And that's where you've got to do the work. So I have decided, after 50 years, 50 years ago, I decided I'm going to move into this, taking Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist psychology as my working hypothesis. And I work with the theories and I practice every day. And eventually I will get clairvoyance based on all the practices and I will see the truth of reincarnation. But I'm working one step at a time. So far, so good. So like I hear mathematics, I want to prove that E = mc². That's a way off yet, but I've got to open my mind to the possibility it's a valid body of knowledge. So I start with it. And then as the Dalai Lama says, if I move forward and I go to this step, and then I get this step, I discover that what Einstein, Buddha, tells me is wrong. I say, thank you, Buddha, and goodbye. Are we communicating now? I've said all this to you before, I'm quite sure. Are we communicating, sweetheart? What do you think?
May I ask the question?
This is only a discussion with
Do
you.
you have evidence in your own?
Evidence is
in your
in the.
own work?
I'm
Yeah.
telling you that it's one step at a time. You can't have proof of experience until you have the theories clear. And then you practice it every day. I'm still waiting, moving along. Evidence, I can prove to you certain things that Buddha has said, that anger makes me upset, jealousy hurts me. I can prove certain things. Like if you're in grade 2 of math, you can prove that 1 + 1 is 2. You go to the next step and then you go to the next one. It's incremental knowledge, one step at a time. All I can do is that. Buddha might be wrong. I'm prepared for him to be wrong. But so far, after 50 years, I'm quite content with my progress, and I'm quite content, and so far I have not found major contradictions from the point of view of my experiences, or even the theories. The theories have to be coherent, Ted. It's one step at a time. That's all I can tell you. But you have to have an open mind to the possibility. Instead of thinking, how can you prove it? Well, I've got to look into the concept of reincarnation, study what the mind is and how this works and how that works. And the theories, Ted. Theories are very powerful. Having coherent theories is a pretty powerful step. I think if you were studying acupuncture, you could learn enough about acupuncture theoretically to pass an exam because it's coherent theory. Then you start ticking needles in people and get the experience. Everybody of knowledge, Ted, if it's valid. So of course we're talking big stuff here. I mean, the concept of is it a creator or not a creator is very sophisticated philosophical knowledge. This is where Buddha diverged in his own direction at the highest level possible of how things exist and how things don't exist. It's highly advanced. But all we can do is go one step at a time and be relaxed about it. I mean, Buddha might be wrong. So far, I'm content with where I'm going. That's all I can say. Sweetheart. Thank you, Ted. Let's go home now or something. Okay, people? Go, darling, go.
I've heard a lot of people are aiming for the Pure Land. Have you heard?
Exactly.
Movement?
So this, yeah.
What do you
Can we
think?
do that another day?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Another whole kettle of fish
Okay.
about the mind and rebirths and possibilities. Yeah, okay. So thank you, people. Thank you, Ted. I love Ted. Jang chub sem chog rinpoche ma ke panam ke gu chig ke banyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du pa ba shog. That's it. Thank you, people. Keep moving. Never give up. One step at a time. Okay, darlings. Thank you, everybody. Much love.
Thank you.